Storytelling, we're doing it every day. You just might not recognize it as such. So you say, why do we go to the movies? Why do we like the movies? Why do I like to read books? Why am I watching television? We're consuming stories every day. We're very aware of that kind of aspect of storytelling. But what you're probably not aware of is that you're all doing this every day. You're all storytellers, is my point. At some point today, near the end of the day, you will meet up with your friends and they will say, what did you do today? Well, you have to tell that story then. See, you don't think of it, you just do it naturally. And there's a way you can do that so that your friend understands it, and there's a way you can do that so that they're like, I don't understand what you're talking about. So there are tons of little choices that matter. You know, you'll have an anime that instead of starting on a wide shot, we'll start on a glass of water with a little ice cube in it, and you'll be on that, and you'll hear two characters talking. It's very esoteric, and you're not sure who's talking or what they're talking about. And then they slowly pull out over like 2 minutes. That's a type of storytelling. It's not Star Wars storytelling. And what I'm going to teach you today is very much what George Lucas taught me, which is the best way to, tell the story of Star Wars, which is it's fast, it's hopefully very clear, and it's usually very original. You know, taking things that you've seen in other ways and doing it in a way you've never seen it before. The Snow Walkers come to mind. You've seen other movies where there are battles on the Western Front, or the Eastern Front in World War II in the snow between the Germans and the Russians, and boom, walkers, never saw anything like that before. Asteroid field, spaceship flying through it like the Millennium Falcon, never seen anything like that before. Most stories start out, and it's kind of like, what is the story about? The big general picture, right? And then who is there? What are they doing? What are they trying to do? And all of that is about clarity. Clarity is the key component of a successful story. I know a lot of what I teach you today or try to inform you of, you're going to go watch a movie and you're going to say, but Dave, they didn't do this in that movie. And you'll say, but I saw it done differently in this movie, and they broke that rule in this movie. And George will just tell you, as he told me, and I'll tell you the same thing. If it was easy to make a good story, everyone would do it. If it was easy to follow these rules, everyone could do it. Live action films have a different onus on them than animated films do in a lot of ways. When you shoot a live action shoot and you're trying to pick up all your coverage, Clone Wars exists in a very difficult period because George has reminded me that he did all the easy things. And he's not sure what's left for us to do. So we have to constantly try to impress him. But if you come to the panels the rest of the weekend, we'll see, you can judge whether we're impressing you guys or not, which is also my goal. So any story starts out basically, to me, with where are we? We're in space, right? We're in space above a planet. One little tiny ship comes over the screen, then a giant massive ship comes over the screen. So there's some information already. Remember, the audience only knows what you show them. They know nothing else. There could be anything around what we're filming, but it really doesn't matter. All that matters is what you're making the camera see. It was once described to me really well, I thought, by someone saying, it's like you have hold of someone's head, and you're saying, look at this, and look at this, now look at that, now look at that. And you're specifically showing the audience what you want them to look at, okay? So, obviously you see space, you see a planet, a little ship comes over screen, a big ship comes over screen. A lot of story just in that, right? The little ship is being shot at, it's running away. Instantly we feel bad for that little ship. It's tiny, it seems insignificant compared to this giant ship. Without even knowing what a Star Destroyer is in 1977, everybody identified that big triangle ship as the evil ship, right? You just all knew it was, it was easy to accept, well, that's a Star Destroyer, it makes sense. Look at it, it's much more powerful, right? You cut around that ship to the front of the blockade runner, it's coming at camera. So now the little ship that went by, you're kind of identifying that character. It's the same as if it was Han Solo, right? You have a wide shot of a hangar, and you see a giant kind of weird looking ship. What a piece of junk. Guy turns around with close up, and this man don't look like it must be, she's got it where it counts. Han Solo, his ship, Han Solo. It establishes the idea of how these things relate. Always be relating one thing to another. It's critical. Don't be coy. Don't be, maybe that's his ship, maybe you understood it. When we have coffee later and a cappuccino, we'll see if you understood it. George doesn't play those games. He's very literal with the stuff in Star Wars. Darth Vader was black, bad guy, right? Stormtroopers surround him, coming out there all white, but they're frowning, menacing. Bad guy, right? A bunch of old guys look like your grandfather wearing helmets. The Rebel Fleet Troopers are like amongst the only troopers in all 6 films that actually take cover when they fight. And they all got shot, right? I only bring this up because George hammers me all the time when clones are fighting in the middle of a hallway. He's like, you gotta get them over to the side. I'm like, I know, right? Like those Rebel Fleet Troopers. That really worked out for them. They're like hiding in doorways, and the guys with armors, they fell right down. But anyway, I like to give him trouble when he gives me trouble. So if you've seen any of the clips released of season 5 online, I think this clip was released. Otherwise, you're getting an awesome spoiler. There was a bunch of Mandalorians oddly protecting Obi-Wan Kenobi, which we won't get into. When a couple of them landed, they all hit their wrist gauntlets, and they had these little shields come up. They started deflecting lasers with them. The whole reason that happened was that Brian O'Connell, the episodic director, when I described the scene to him, he staged them right in the middle of this big hallway, and they're shooting at each other. And I'm like, God, man, these guys must be terrible shots because they're gonna go down so easily. They're right in the middle of this hallway. You know what George thinks of that. And he was like, oh, do you want me to reshoot it? And so then as supervisor director, I gotta make a choice. Either I'm gonna make these guys do a whole bunch of work, right, in one direction, or I can come up with a creative solution. So I said, well, Mandalorians are clever. We'll just say these guys have little gauntlet, they have little shields like gladiators come up, a couple of them. They're deflecting in the hallway, protecting the others, and that's how we solved that. So anyway, I digress. Establishing shot of the Senate, right? Typically the Senate office building is something like this. We've all seen it in the films, right? We got lines of traffic. Of course, it's got more traffic than anything. But this, and we're probably doing a slight drift in, right? Something okay, this scene's going to take place in the Senate, right? We push in towards this building, we can then cut to that building. So then the next shot is usually a shot that reestablishes relatively something like this, right? This is a terrible drawing. Forgive me. I'm getting used to drawing it. Anyway, it's a shot that establishes the inside of an office, and normally you see people standing there. Here's a stairwell, here's a circle right here. All right? What we have to do then at that point is go in. Right, there's our boy Palpatine. We'll just call that Palpatine. Let's go in. So we establish, we go in, we go in. Okay, now, you notice Palpatine's looking what I would call right to left, okay, on my screen. We cut to who he's talking to. You know that is just from the, right, let me be very brief. Storyboards don't need to be beautiful. Right, but let's say he's talking to the Jedi, they're looking left to right. That throws their screen direction back against each other, so you know one is looking at the other, you see? Establish, go in, go in. That's the main thing George told me when we started to make this show. I want you to establish each scene, then I want you to push in and push in. So what it's telling you is location, inside the room, there are people there talking, this guy's talking to them. It's also good to have over the shoulder shot. So if you had that as Palpatine's shoulder looking across his desk, and you could have a character like Mace Windu sitting here. Yoda's a tricky one, I'll tell you, because he's so short. It's a consideration, it makes it really hard to frame. You remember in Attack the Clones, he's in that little hover chair? The sightlines were all off. When they got the footage back, the sightlines were all off, and they had to figure out a creative way to make it so the actors were actually looking at Yoda, so they actually had to float him up in a chair, because they were so busy, I guess they forgot that he would be much lower target in the eye line, and they corrected it in the movie after that. So, again, this is all about establishing the idea, where we are, wide shots. You know, why is a wide shot important? Well, a wide shot tells you a lot of information, right? You start on a close-up, you'll notice in a movie it can be aggravating because you don't know where someone is. You ever watch a movie and you find yourself kind of bobbing your head a little bit, like you really want to see what they're talking about? You can use that as a tool, but most of the time in Star Wars you don't get that kind of shot. We don't make it oftentimes so you don't really know what's going on. Establishing shot, another one. This is obviously one. We use this in almost every episode. We use it so much they don't like when we render new ones. Right, Jedi Temple. Okay, most of the time when you go inside the Jedi Temple, you see, you start, again, a wide shot on the inside. Maybe someone's standing in the middle, right? Again, now, you see the similarity between the other scene that we just did. We had a wide shot exterior of the Senate. We have a wide shot exterior of Jedi Temple. We go inside. We reestablish the room. Now we're inside a room, inside that temple. One idea goes to the next idea. After that, we could cut, maybe we want to cut to this person over here. This is where we start to get a little more sophisticated with our thinking. So if I've got, let's say that's Mace Windu right there on that third, right? Because you can divide the frame up into thirds. Watch. 1, 2, so 3 parts, right? You divide it this way. See, 3 parts. Now, your eye naturally in this shape, in this rectangle, is going to go to this area, this area, this area, this area. The most interesting in the center, right? So these are kind of your targets of interest. So if I've got a character here, and that's Mace Windu, and I want to cut to a close-up of him, I can do something like this. Everybody folds their hands into that council. Logan's famous for it. It's all he did for several movies. And then he was so cool.
Maybe they teach all the younglings how to do it in their classes.
To fold their hands? I think it's respectful, you know. I think there's not much, I mean, what kind of crazy thing you're gonna do when you're sitting in a chair? I mean, you're folding your hands right now, right? I mean, so, hard to say. I do know, I mean, I've wondered it, and some of you have seen online, I've wondered it out, but this whole cut circles thing drives me crazy with Jedi, like how they make such perfect circles when they cut holes in walls. And some of them cut squares, because Barris cut a square. And I was like, that's fascinating. I wonder why she cut a square. She's like such a rebel. But then you look at like Yariel Poof, and you're like, man, what kind of shape would he cut to go through anything? He would like, if he came, like, you have to hope if you're like defending against someone that Yoda comes to your house, because he would cut a really small hole. So like fixing it and patching it wouldn't be that big a deal. But if Yariel Poof comes, you're like, oh my gosh, look at this sucker. He's gonna cut like this giant shape. I pondered once drawing a Jedi starfighter that guy could fly, and the cockpit just looked ridiculous. I was like, does he bend his neck all the way down to get it in the ship? Plunkett and I go crazy with that kind of stuff. He's just like, I guess he doesn't even fly. You know, maybe he does. Maybe he's got some crazy ship we've never seen before. But I don't know. Like, yeah, that's the kind of thing. If I start going on about with George, he just looks at me. He's just like. I'm like, because Yariel Poof's so tall, George. I don't know. The door, like, there's different doors. Like, are all the doors different sizes? There's this area of the temple. Maybe it's bigger than the other areas of the temple. I think Yoda lives in a really small area of the temple. And he's just like. He's like, how did you get in here? I'm like, boy, the show looks good, right? Anyway. So anyway, my point being that I told you we're going to run all over here. You know, this will be part educational, part you'll leave here going, I don't know what is going on, but look at the third, right? Now, if Mace's head is right here and I cut right here, your eye will not have to move, especially if this character is talking. If this character is talking, you send all your focus right there. When you cut, right, your eye stays there. That's an elected choice. You can start to use this skill when you watch movies and start to pay attention between the cuts. Now, anytime you're watching a shot and the actors are playing in it and it doesn't cut to a different angle, right, that's one shot, okay? You look at older movies like by Hitchcock, they'll let a single shot run a very long time. It's a really credit to Jimmy Stewart and those guys that they could like carry one shot that long. Alfonso Cuarón, the director, probably, I don't know, you would know him for Children of Men, you would know him for the third Harry Potter film, Azkaban. One thing that he does that's brilliant, and Steven Spielberg does it as well, is it was stage direction, where he will move people up and down, in and out of a staging. Within one shot, he'll have a character like Lupin come to the front of the stage and have Harry kind of move to the back of the stage. While he's on that same shot, Harry will move to the front of the stage and Lupin will move to the back. You know, all those relationships with the characters are telling you something about their attitude and their expression, what you're trying to get communicated to you from the scene. And they're all making choices on how these scenes cut from one shot to the next, one shot to the next. Do you want the eye to travel back to this character and then back to that character? So You see how your eye does not do what I would call ping-ponging between these two shots, because it can stay consistent if Mace is talking. This is not true if you do it this way. Right, okay, sorry about that. So we got Anakin on one side. Can you see that? Yeah, there we go. We got Anakin on one side, we got Obi-Wan on the other. This is what we call an over-the-shoulder shot. Now, if he's talking, our eyes over here. We cut. Suddenly this space is completely empty, right? Telling us there's nothing going on over here. So our eyes naturally going to go to over here. See? 1 to 2, 1 to 2. If you picture these things on top of one another, okay? Now Obi-Wan commands the attention. He could be talking, he could be not talking. No matter what, your eye goes to him. So, by doing this, let's say Anakin's still talking, okay, and we cut to Obi-Wan. As a director, what you're saying to the audience is, Obi-Wan's reaction to what Anakin is saying is important. You ever see that? Some of my favorite stuff in movies, and it's a critical thing for directors, I think, is to know when to show another character and their reaction to something that's happening, their reaction to something that's being said. It's not always just keep the camera on the person that's talking, you know? Let me see what somebody else thinks of that. I mean, how many times have you watched a movie and somebody says something, you're like, oh, I wonder what they think of that. Then you cut to them, but you might not get the reaction of the moment, you know? So again, that's a choice. Then we go back to Anakin. Now you see Anakin stays on this side. He's on the left side of the frame. Obi-Wan's always on the right. Okay? There's an invisible line of screen direction here, and this is what we're following. As long as Anakin is on the left and Obi-Wan is on the right, you're going to understand this, even if you don't know who the two of them are. You know, you can break this down very simply this way. Right? Okay, see the last one? See how weird that is? When a character flops across the line, you break the screen direction. You break the natural logic of things. Now, some people do that intentionally. It's not something we would typically try to do in Star Wars. In live action, you'll see this phenomenon happen a lot more. A lot of that, there are many reasons why that can happen. Some of it is that sometimes when they're filming in a set, in a room, they can't get the camera to the other side in certain places. Most of the time, what you need is what I call a passing position shot, which would be something like this. Now it makes sense. You saw the objects pass one another, so your eye follows the logic of it. Okay? This is all has to do with screen direction. Very simply, when you have a box, you can have what's called a 3-camera system. To understand this very simply. We used it all the time when I worked on King of the Hill. King of the Hill is probably a really good education for me as far as like how to shoot something, because we tried to film King of the Hill most of the time like a sitcom. We didn't really ever break out of that discipline. A couple times I did an episode where Hank went to the Dallas Cowboys training camp. And so because he was at the Dallas Cowboys training camp and he had this moment where he went out on the football field and he found this lone football sitting there, I wanted the audience to identify with Hank's feeling of this is a special moment and a cinematic moment. So I shot it more like the film The Natural, the baseball film, and I did some really wide shots. And for probably one of the first times ever on that TV series, you actually saw an upshot of Hank Hill. You never really would see an upshot, you know, something shot below the midline of the character on him. And I did that to give it this almost kind of Newt Rockney grandiose feeling. The writers of the show went nuts because they'd never even seen this kind of thing before on their show, so it actually worked out. We got away with it for that one scene, but the 3-camera system is basically this. If you have, I mean, this goes back to Lucille Ball, you know, The Honeymooners. All those shows basically work off a 3-camera system where you got your 3 cameras, right? And let's say you've got, I mean, a lot of times there's a dinner table or something, right? You've got two characters here and here. You usually had a door into the room that was visible. It might be on that end. There might be a door to another room over here. You know, the Cosby Show is a more elaborate version of this, but you always saw that living room, remember, from like that one side, right? Because they built a set, they built the three sides. You never saw the side of the room that you were looking in from. That was your window into that world, okay? So from these three cameras, right, you can pull that camera back to this A position out here, any of these cameras, and that would give you a corresponding wide shot, okay, from any of these points. From this side of the room over here, it would be a wide shot looking at that back wall. See what I mean? With the table. From the middle, it would obviously show you the whole room. Something like this, with the characters seated at the table, with the door in the back. And from that other side, it would show you the other corner of the room, with the characters seated at that table. But you would get an establishing shot out of any of those three. That gives you three options, basically. Then you can push the cameras into a B position, and you get like a closer shot, a medium shot, okay? Which might show the top of the table and the torso of the character standing there, or sitting at the table. And then you can go all the way in here, and we call this a C position, and you would get your close-ups of the character sitting at the table, which is basically a chest up or a head and shoulder shot. You can also shoot any of these in between, you see? And because the camera would never fall beyond this line, you have this arc. So these cameras could eventually pivot all the way down to this line and all the way down to this line, okay? But you would never go beyond that. Because if you took the camera across this line, suddenly you would break that screen direction logic I was talking about with the triangles and the circle, where this character would appear on the wrong side of the other character. Does that make sense? You understand that? It seems so simple, and when I talk about this, it seems so simple. This gets screwed up so quickly, you can't imagine it. And George has always told me, you can separate the really great film directors from the really good film directors by watching how people follow this or not, and how they control this simple principle or not, okay? Well, we could talk a little bit about composition, if you like, a little bit of composition. On Airbender, when I worked on that show, we discovered something really strange about what kids are being taught in school, at least art school, and storyboarding. A lot of kids didn't understand three-point perspective. They didn't understand how to establish a true depth in all the shots, okay? Strange to me, I mean, we learned it when we were in school, Jason. I don't know what was happening with the young kids today. The kids today, blame those kids today, Jason. They just don't get the education we got when we were young, and I don't know, dang it, what they're doing. They go to school and they're hanging out and they're partying and they're doing that kind of thing instead of focusing on education. I went to one party in college and got hit by a semi-truck. That's actually true. I'll segue into that little story. I never partied in college. I did not see the point of that. I had 4 years of education paid for by my dad. He said a fifth year would cost me personally, so I said, I'm not going to be there 5 years. So I studied very hard, and finally one day I said, this is ridiculous. I'm not enjoying this maybe as much as I could, so I loaded up with Mayor Shane Donaldson, and we got in our friend's truck, and it was icy up in Erie, Pennsylvania, where I went to school. We got on the freeway and proceeded to slide sideways down the freeway and got hit by a semi-truck, knocked a quarter of a mile down the road. Had it not been so icy, would have rolled and probably not survived. I took that as a sign that my task in college was not to party. I survived the accident and unscathed, you know, completely unscathed, but yeah, that was something. So, you know, school's a place to learn. You want to party, you know, go waste your time at school. It costs too much money. You know, take that advice. And I would also say don't head to school until you really think you know what you want to do. You know, it's an expensive proposition to go to school these days. I really empathize. But no matter what it is you want to do, just make sure you really love it. You're going to spend a lot of time the rest of your life doing it, whatever it is, whether it's filmmaking or something else. Sometimes you really like doing something and other people go, why would you want to do that? Well, maybe they just don't understand you. To succeed in a career, you need to get around people that understand what you do and like what you do, and they'll mentor you and help you figure out what you're going to do. I learned a lot in the 4 years I was in college, but in 1 year working on King of the Hill, I learned more than in 4 years. I was working with people that had, made the classic Disney films that filmed on and had wiped cells that were painted on glass in animation. They knew infinitely more than I could ever imagine. And listen, it's your number one skill when you start a new job, young people, is listening to people up in there ahead of you. Anyway, now I'm preaching. That's no good. So, sorry about that. Just send your kids over to me. I'm like supervisor director / life coach. All the young people on my crew. I'm like, have you even seen Jaws? And they're like, oh, the movie's boring. I'm like, okay, I'm shocked you still work here. Let me sit you down and explain this to you. I mean, I can't imagine. Movies they haven't seen, it blows my mind. I worked with a bunch of writers once, they didn't know what the Seven Samurai was. I was like, why are you here? Do you know who you're working for? Do you know who George Lucas is? Oh yeah. I'm like, do you know that he understudied with Kurosawa? Sorry, stop. Do you know who Kurosawa is? But times have just changed. When we made the episode Bounty Hunters, all the kids blogged online, look, they did the Clone Wars at Bug's Life tonight. I was like, well, that's true. But we were doing Seven Samurai, doing Bug's Life, doing Clone Wars, but that's okay, It's a great story, that's why we all do it, anyway. Most of the time, if I'm filming a character, if you want a dominant character, like, let's say our buddy El Dooku, I like to shoot him kind of with an upshot. A little bit 3/4. He got a big nose. If you do something like this, and this canted angle is not something that you would have seen in the traditional Star Wars movies, not very much. We do it at a request of George Lucas. He wanted our show to be slightly more what he called anime. What that means is he wanted more of that tilted lens kind of 3-point perspective. In Avatar, we would, kind of fake this by doing a lot of forced perspective things. So we would try to shoot under the characters, and we would do this kind of stuff. Right? You see a lot of drawings like this actually in Fooly Cooly. If you watch that, Now you notice how it comes really close, what I would call close to far. What this is imitating is a lens choice ultimately when we're drawing it in 2D, a lens choice. This would probably, the best effect you could get, this is out of a 16mm lens. Probably, Joel? 16, I think. 16-21. 16 is usually the tightest lens we like to go on Clone Wars. Most of the time, if you're shooting a close-up, you would shoot a 35mm, which would tend to flatten things out a lot. You get up close on a character. I'm teaching you all this, and I'm going to let you in on a little secret that drives Joel and I crazy. But for a close-up, you want to go 35 more. But a lot of times, because of the speed we work at, the guys will shoot one scene in 16 that's kind of medium wide scene or a wide scene that looks great. Then they'll shoot a close-up and forget to change their lens, and the lens stays at 16. That's when the Clone Wars faces look really bent and weird. And sometimes we don't catch it because you don't really notice it, but it has that fisheye effect. It really pulls everything out to the side because it's preventing you a wider view in a narrower space. If we're in a really tight room, if you think of the shots, if you remember the episode Lethal Trackdown, when Boba Fett goes into the back of Slave One to talk to Admiral Killian, I shot that with a 16 and a 21mm lens because the room was so tight and I wanted to see a lot of information. That's when you get that feeling that the walls are bent in our show and it feels a little bit more distorted. It can also be a story choice when you're making that kind of choice, because if I want to get to a character that feels a little bit more crazed, a little bit more out of it, like a lot of times when Pre Vizsla was governor, I would shoot the scenes very flat. And the more that he got twisted, the more we would start to tilt the lens and tilt the horizon so that you could see that his view of the world is distorted. And we were showing that through the way that we framed him. You want to know a great example of that that's really easy to see, and you will love this reference, but the Batman movie from the 60s, right, the Adam West Batman, any shots of the villains, the horizon's always tilted. Any shot of Batman and Robin, it's not. They're heroes, the other guys are villains. So if you think it's just a campy movie, think again. A lot of thought goes into all these movies. I'll tell you this much about going to the local theater and seeing a movie and thinking, well, that wasn't a very good movie. I know you all do it. It's so much easier to think that after the fact. It's so much easier after all the choices have been made to sit there and go, they just should have made this choice instead. And believe me, the people that make these movies like myself, we sit there and we go, when we watch it, we're like, oh, we should have done that instead. And I look at the producer, hey, can I change? No, there's no money? No money? Okay, I guess we're done. That happens more often than you know. Remember, filmmaking is an art to be sure, but it's an art on a budget and a time constraint. And I think what really is amazing about some of the most incredible films you see is how they pull it off and it works. You know, and you're just like, that's amazing, because everybody was on the same page. I was lucky to be at a lecture with Martin Scorsese. He said something that resonates so strong with me, I parrot it all the time now. He said, when you start to make a movie, make sure everybody's trying to make the same movie. Make sure your actors are trying to make the same movie you are. Make sure that everybody's setting up the lights, the DP, everybody's making the same movie. As a director, it's my responsibility to make sure that everybody working on an episode is making the same version of that episode. You know, when you read a book, you can decide for yourself. Like prior to, you know, the cinematic adaptations of a movie like Lord of the Rings, we could all read the book and have in our mind our own version of what we think, you know, Frodo looks like. Once that's up on screen, then that locks that down. Okay, so now we all think of Elijah Wood, right? But it's a director's thing. Like Peter Jackson has to take everybody's vision of what those books are and say, but this is the vision we're making, the vision for my movies. And he has to keep them on track. It's the same thing with George. I mean, there's so much expanded material out there now. We have to harness that all, harness all the ideas of what Star Wars is and say, yeah, but this is the version that we're making. This is what his original intent is. And that's why we're lucky to have George, because I can always go back to him and say, is this what you meant? And he'll tell me yes or no. And I change it. But yeah, composition, you know, is a character close to camera. I was just actually making notes on a sequence today for the guys back in California, because I'm still reviewing shots while I'm here. And I was trying to communicate to them that there was a scene between this one blankety-blank character and another character, just to paint a vivid picture for you. And I said, but I'll give you a little clue. I really want to see what she's thinking. And the problem is that you have this in a two-shot. And I don't want it in a two-shot, because this person just said something kind of dramatic and is kind of leaning in. And I want to see what she thinks of that. And you're shooting it back over his shoulder. Well, the audience isn't up with her. We're not right in her face. And I want to know what she thinks of this moment. That's a critical thing. So the composition would draw her closer to the camera. Another thing, and George definitely taught me this, was that I will show you. I will illustrate. Believe me, I get it all the time. I mean, when we make a Clone Wars episode, you could be right. It's usually when I'm screening it, final sound, mix and everything, and you're watching it and you're like, oh, this is really good. Yeah. What is that? Oh my gosh. And then you're like, oh, no, this is that. And you try to get the color correct artist to black it out. And, right, Joel? Those happy accidents. Anyway, okay, my point of this. Let's look at here, right? Look at her. Just kind of focus on that image for a second. You kind of probably feel like you understand what she's thinking. She's looking, you wonder what she's looking at. She's kind of cross-eyed, but that's a Sharpie. But you have a connection to her. Go to the next frame. You might not feel that as strong a connection. Go to the next frame. You're getting a little more distant from her. Go to the next frame. I don't really know what she's thinking as much. There's a connection between the audience and the actor, and how much they feel like the actor is actually looking at them off the screen and how much they're not looking at them. The more you're on their line of sight, the more you can actually connect with them. So if we started a scene and we're like this, and we ended a scene and we're close like this, it makes a big difference. Also, it would matter if we started a scene and the next time we cut to her and we're this close, right? So your whole TV set becomes her face. You know, and you're right in the middle of her emotion. I'm going to use that to devastating effect later this year. All right, so let's watch a clip. I don't want you to pay attention. There's no dialogue in this clip. At least there should be. I'm not even sure it's the right clip, to be perfectly honest with you. I was so busy before I left. I had my one editor, Nick, get these 3 clips on here. I know 2 of them are right, at least I think they are. But I'm really curious if this first clip is the right clip. It might not be in here in the lesson, but it might be the right clip, and then we can proceed. So there will be no sound, there is no dialogue. What I was hoping for, if it's the right sequence, is that you will notice an emotion and an attitude just in how these characters are framed in the shot and how they're oriented to each other. If it's not, then I'll look at it and I'll know what it is, and I'll say, well, you're not really going to get that from this, but maybe so. It should work with any clip, right? But I'm hoping for one. It probably isn't that one because that's how it's going to go today, but let's roll it. Oh, good it is. See the screen direction thing I'm talking about? Yeah. Left, right. See it would pop out, left, right. Looks up, eye direction up. Down at Obi-Wan. Eye direction still up to Anakin. Left, right. Left, right. Still left, still right, no matter how wide you get. Back to the same as shot. Passing. Actually straight in front of each other now, but it was left, right. Still looking left. Same as shot. Pushed in, same shot but closer. And back out wide. Wide to end, just nice. All right, stop it there. So you can see there's a whole language there, there's not any dialogue. Ideas, you can raise your hand. What do you think? What are you feeling from that scene? Right, by hands, right here.
And eats roasting marshmallows. Obi-Wan just went s'mores.
That's a possibility. That would work. You get basically Anakin dislike. All right, what do you got?
It seems that Anakin is really impressed on something Obi-Wan's trying to help, get over his emotions because Jedi aren't supposed to let their emotions control them.
That's very good. Let's keep it more basic and say Anakin's upset about something, Obi-Wan's trying to help him out of it. What you bring up is interesting, and it's a critical point of advice for you about making a movie, especially a fantasy film. The fact that they are Jedi, yes, put certain rules on them, but don't let those rules define you while you make your story. George has always told me, making Star Wars, any subject can be a Star Wars story. The idea that it's Star Wars is just the trappings of it, and by what that means is, if we took the plot of American Graffiti, we could apply it to Star Wars. They would just be in land speeders instead of cars. To George, the most important thing about the story is the emotions that drive it and the characters that are in it. And at the end, we decorate it up and make it Star Wars. It does give us advantages because Jedi can jump higher, do things faster, and they do have a code of rules. But at the basic inception of the story, we tend not to think of that stuff. But nonetheless, your analysis is very good. Anybody else? One more? Go ahead.
There's a real sense of frustration from Obi-Wan when he finally breaks that look where he's staring, and he breaks it, and he just turns and lays down, and he's done.
That's right. Now, did you guys notice at certain points the characters are looking at one another, and at certain points they're not? Those are directorial choices. All of those decisions come out of blocking. In live action, you would sit down and actually talk to the actors and say, this is how I want to walk you through the scene, and you would have marks on the set. That's an incredible thing, frankly, about live action movies, is that you have to understand that all those actors, while they're performing, have to be hitting certain spots on a stage, diving down into positions, delivering lines. They do something that's completely unnatural and make it seem like it's very natural, like it's actually happening in that moment. And they probably run through it several times before they actually get the take they want. We program it all and have them hit marks and stuff. So at certain moments I elected to have Anakin not look at Obi-Wan. At certain moments I had Obi-Wan, turn away from Anakin. And that's telling you part of the story. And now I won't even tell you what that's really about. That's not even important for you guys to know what they're really talking about. That's so far off. That's so far off in your future. You got the gist of it anyway. Always emotions the future. That might not even be a real scene from the show. I might have just made that up. You don't even know. Huh? How do I know? I know because I make the show. I know what's real and not real. It's scary. Your focus determines your reality, and so does my Monday morning. So let's see where we're at now. I think what I'm going to do now is it's 6:23. I have 10 minutes left. I've squandered my time. I'm going to give you a quick breakdown of how we do an action sequence on Clone Wars, something you guys might wonder. So, as supervising director for pretty much most of the scenes, though I have incredible episodic directors, they're awesome. I really love to sit down with them and explain how I want a whole episode to go. Sometimes in a lot more detail, sometimes in less, because they're all super talented guys. But I break down pretty much all the action sequences. We have action meetings that are specifically for how we're going to stage a lightsaber fight, how we're going to stage a space battle, and we'll go over it and do a big diagram of it. This was an episode that I directed. It was called Wookiee Hunt and Padawan's Lost. They were the season finale of season 3, I believe. And I was really lucky because one of my episodic directors, when I direct an episode personally anymore, what happens is I relegate the episodic director to become like an assistant director or a layout artist on the episode. And then I lord over the whole thing and get it all my way, which is awesome. It's a fun part of my job. Like right now, I've got Kyle Dunleavy. I'm directing an episode right now, and he's back in San Francisco making sure it doesn't, catch on fire when I'm gone and be a complete disaster when I get back. They're all super talented guys. Kyle was actually an animation lead for me in Singapore for several years of the first couple seasons. But I broke down a scene. Let me see if I can talk while I do this. I don't know. And it was the crash of the Transition slave ship. You might recall. I hope you guys have seen that episode. I really like that episode. Did you see that episode? Some of you were quiet. It's one where Chewbacca came back, right? So basically there was this situation. A big transport ship, remember it? So what I described to Kyle was, we've got the beach down here. The beach had these kind of spiky thorn-like things sticking up from it. Here's the water out here. We had Ahsoka down here. It's gonna look like a football play in a second, okay, so get ready. Basically, I wanted Ahsoka and the other Padawans to run up here and jump off of one of these spear-like things onto the ship. I said Ahsoka could run up and jump and land on the cockpit glass, because that'd be really funny. And that would get the transitions inside activated. Then she's gonna run up here. basically then Omar and Jinx are not going to be seen because they're going to run to the back of the ship here, but the transition comes out and they're going to attack them and wind up over here on this ledge in this battle. Ahsoka then will proceed inside. That starts a separate fight, which happens inside the cockpit of the ship, where she comes in the doorway and there's a transition at the control panel. The little fat one was sitting there, and Ahsoka comes in the back. Okay, so now we have two action scenes going on at the same time, one outside and one inside. On the one outside, Omar and Jinx, I wanted it to be clear that the transitions are much larger than these two kids. The kids are weak because they've been, starved and hungry and scavenging, so they're not, as proficient as they might have been with the Force. So they wouldn't choke them or anything like that. They're not going to use the dark side to do this. So the transition thus could have a good hand-to-hand combat fight with them. I want him to punch and throw these kids and want him to try to choke one of them, and he can throw them off, and you get these moments where one of them hits this and he kicks another one back against this, and the transition is here. But I came with this idea because I love showing you guys stuff you've never seen before, which is I can't remember if it was Omar or Jinx. One of them ran at the transition and jumped, and then the other one used the Force to grab him and spin him, and actually threw the other Jedi to transition to have more velocity, and he kicked him, boom. That gets everybody kind of tumbling off, and they're going to wind up hanging here, just like this, while the other Padawan tries to climb down and kick them all off. Remember this stuff? Eventually, so that's all going on the outside. And I'll tell Kyle something like, the line is here. So remember your box, I was talking about the 3-box room from King of the Hill? This is your 3 walls. Do you see them that we're shooting? Those 3 walls actually pivot for complexity, but mainly it's a left to right staging this way. Inside, Ahsoka is creeping up on this guy, and he spins around and shoots, and she jumps. Then she's going to dodge around this room as he's firing and eventually use the Force to push him. She's pushing his gun blaster. He's got like a shotgun. Every time he tries to shoot her, she pushes him with the Force. He pushes his gun like this, and he fires up and can't hit her. Eventually she's going to Force push him. He's going to get pushed out the glass of the window partway through, laying there. But in this battle, the control stick is going to get compromised, and the whole ship is going to start to turn. So while this is happening outside, this whole thing is going to start to rotate, spin slowly out of control, pick up in velocity, while this fight is happening, so that Omar and Jinx can kick this guy off, and he'll fly off somewhere safely into the water. Who knows, maybe he probably died. He actually did die. I was just trying to take a soft on you. And then they jump on the glass, tell Ahsoka we need to get out of here, and they're all going to jump and land here to safety. That's kind of the diagram of the whole thing. And then, just for the heck of it, I would describe to Kyle, a couple shots I'd like to get, which is the water low here like these thorns and tree branches, and the ship's coming out of the fog. Here's the water. And get Ahsoka somewhere in the foreground looking over her shoulder as the other guys are coming into scene here. So we establish left and right nature of the characters. They're always attacking left, they're always defending right. When the whole thing spins around you, you can see that holds up. And eventually, I think we took the clip to the end, I'm not quite sure. But when I think of a scene, I always think of iconic moments. One of the iconic moments was definitely going to be when we had the transition. You'll see him like hanging off for dear life, trying to hold on to these Padawans, and he's got like his leg and they're holding on like this, and everything down beneath them is spinning. That's kind of an iconic moment. Another iconic moment, I don't know if it's in the clip or not, was going to be the reveal of Chewbacca, which was he was going to rise up out of this, all the broken wreckage of it, with the ship crash in the background. Here's all the smoke and steam. And I wanted him to be this big lumbering shape that the Padawans were chewing with sparks raining down. Joel does a great job with that. But this is the main battle plan of it. So we break that down, and then we kind of talk about the shots. I want to shoot up here inside this wing and down over here over the edge. I want to keep the camera this way, looking left to right on Ahsoka and right to left on the transition. So Kyle did a masterful job. He's a brilliant cameraman. Why don't we look at the next clip, which is the proxy animation. Not final clip, story clip, there you go. So here we're establishing the beach, like establishing the Jedi Temple, right? This is where we are. Oh, here are some characters, right? We're seeing them full body, but now we're establishing a relationship,
We'll have to be
left
swift.
to right.
Oh, it's not far.
Here are the characters, right? Left, now right. I'm establishing inside the ship. Who's in the ship? We gotta know who's in the ship. Here comes the ship closer,
Now,
and here we go. Right up, jump. There we go on top, boom.
What the? It's one of the last Jedi bells. Get her!
One outside, one inside. Right, here he comes. Right to left. Left to right, here they come, boom, new element. They're fighting outside. Clearly show her go inside. Now we know everybody's separated. Do something cool. Pretty cool. Do something cooler. And here comes Ahsoka. Trying to sneak up on the fat man. Bang. Look how quick she is. See how he bumped his stick? Now, that's what we call an insert shot, when you see the control throttle move, which explains this action. Cause and effect. Cause and effect are huge. Wide shot to explain the action. Notice the tilting background. There she goes. Bang. He's done. Spinning further out of control, making the pieces break off so you know the thing's falling apart. Grabs his foot, takes it from one level of jeopardy to another level of jeopardy. Something Indiana Jones did really well. Probably didn't make it.
Get out of there, come on!
Still love this shot. The special effects, dream/nightmare. Boom. Into the sand.
Well, I guess we won't be escaping on that ship.
Obviously.
Establish a new idea, they all look to the right.
What was that?
Something to the right of them, we don't know what it is. They go to investigate, still left to right, notice.
it could be one of the prisoners they were dropping off.
Ooh, what's that shape? Keep it mysterious.
What is that?
And through the smoke, there's that shot.
It's a Wookiee.
You love Chewbacca. Alright, so, in that clip, I'm running short on time. In that clip, you can see all the things that I think I was talking about the whole episode, this whole class. It really draws things. No matter how complex it gets, it's all based on these very basic principles I was trying to drive home. And then now, just for a further level of enjoyment, the last level of direction, we'll look at the final clip of that so you can see how it goes from a proxy level to finished animation/lighting. So let's look at that. And I'll go over some of the details that were added here. Now we've got some moving water there, of course, to sell the beach. A lot more little twisty vines, etc.
Get ready. We'll have to be swift.
I always wanted that to be pushing through the fog there, I always told Joel. I want those lights through the fog. It's just so creepy. My brother likes railroads, so I threw that in there. You always saw trains coming through like that. It looks like a giant monster, you know?
What the? It's one of the blasted Jedi bells. Get her!
Notice how the light also takes you to where you're supposed to look. She looks over, which cues you over to them.
I'll take the pilot.
spark in there to help draw your eye. It also speaks to the malfunction of spark. He threw a lot of little pipes and things along there as he climbed up, just for added level of detail and reality. Inside, the sparking helps tell the story of the malfunction of the entire ship. Little broken glass, nice custom gold. Watch in between the cars, the electricity fails between the different sections. All of those big water splashes are just hand-painted elements. No real sim going on of water or anything expensive like that.
Get out of there, come on!
But the prisoners, they'll die.
Hit the release, hurry!
Notice that line wasn't in the proxy. What about the prisoners will die, hit the release hearing? That was a revision that George asked for between proxy to final. That was a boatload of special effects from Joel Aaron.
Well, I guess we won't be escaping on that ship.
We'll find another way.
Notice last time she said obviously. George didn't want her to be such a jerk. The sparking helps draw your eyes to where Chewbacca was.
What is that?
It's a Wookiee.
See how we're on her face for her expression? There you go. That's the final thing. I think I covered everything that I could in this short amount of time. An hour is a desperately short amount of time to try to get to all of this, but hopefully you have a slightly better understanding of how we tell a story and what makes the fundamentals of storytelling. As a thank you for coming and putting up with this for an hour, we have a special certificate that you will receive for taking this class, which says, Star Wars Celebration 6, having attended Star Wars University and having completed the necessary studies required by the Galactic Republic. This is to certify that with all the honors and privileges pertaining thereto. You write your name there. I'm not doing it for you. Blank is a graduate of Telling a Star Wars Story with Clone Wars Supervised Director Dave Filoni, August 23, 2012, and you signed yourself there. I signed it already for you. So thank you for coming today, guys. Really appreciate it. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend here at Celebration. Thank you so much.